Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. First of all, to all the Pakistanis out there who are watching us right now, happy Independence Day as well. So, this webinar is the second webinar of the Study Abroad webinar series. The first webinar was conducted a week ago, in which we talked in detail about the study abroad procedure, the prospects as well. And so this webinar again will be somewhat a follow-up of that webinar in which we'll be talking about the living and the settling costs and etc. about in Australia and the New Zealand. So this webinar again is conducted by the Aga Khan Education Board for Pakistan in collaboration with the Aga Khan Education Board for Australia and New Zealand. Um, Before we start, let me just introduce to our amazing speaker of this webinar. His name is Anish Lakhani. Anish is the national member of Social Welfare Portfolio for Australia and New Zealand Council. Professionally, Anish has two careers. He works full time in information technology as an IT manager for Medibank Private Limited, health insurance company, and is also a part-time property developer, as he is passionate about construction industry as well. By education, Anish has completed his master's in IT from the University of Western Sydney and has also completed bachelor's in computer applications from Gujarat University, India. Anish migrated to Australia as an international student back in 2002 and has hands-on experience of being international student, working professional, and now raising family in Australia. Anish manages iCare team within social welfare portfolio in Australia and New Zealand, whose mandate is to support recent migrants and international students settle in ANZ region. Welcome, Anish. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for agreeing to this webinar. So, just to give you an overflow of how we're going to go about this webinar, this is going to be somewhat similar to how we conducted our previous webinar. It's going to be Anish speaking about the living and settling in Australia and New Zealand, after which we are going to open our floor for the question and answer. Just to remind you, there will be a feedback and assessment form at the end during the question answer platform or section as well. So I would request you to fill that out for us as well. Now, without further ado, Anish, over to you.
Thank you, Shanil. Yalimudad, everyone, and happy Independence Day, as Shanil mentioned. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here with you today and talk to you about this wonderful second webinar about living and settling in Australia and New Zealand. If you can share my presentation slide, please. Thank you. So before we start on the webinar, I just want to convey this message that the webinar 1, which was delivered by Nazim and Shehzad on 7th of August, is now available on the YouTube channel. So feel free to jump on the YouTube channel and you can actually see the retelecast of that webinar. So now let's talk about webinar 2. In this webinar, we'll be covering various topics such as we'll probably start with the country profile just so that you know what the Australia and New Zealand countries are about, just a bit of background for you. Then we'll talk about living in ANZ. We'll talk about health and well-being, cost of living, money management and finances, finding a job and working in ANZ. And there are various work rights while studying. We'll talk about that as well. We'll also talk about the skills required for migrating in ANZ. So how can you educate yourself in terms of finding out what skills are currently required in Australia and New Zealand so that you can make a right decision for your course and so forth. And then we'll also talk about the settlement guides, which you can also download, and you can actually contact us, and we can actually email it to you. So we'll share that email address as well. And we also have Sharmin from Melbourne, who'll be talking to us about her experience for living in Australia. In Melbourne, and she's also from Pakistan, so she can share her story, and then we'll open up a Q&A. Yeah. Now, before I go along, I want to make this webinar quite quite fun, so if you got any and also interactive as well, so if you got any questions, feel free to put that up on the chat box, so that we can actually read those questions towards the end, and answer as many as we can. In terms of to make this more fun, I will be sharing some tips along the way during the webinar. So I strongly encourage you note down those tips, because it will be really helpful for you when you decide to embark on this journey. Yeah. So moving on. First of all, let me just quickly make this disclaimer clear, I guess, because the information which will be provided in this webinar is only for general purpose only, and is meant to serve as a guide only. And I'm not the immigration agent or the education service provider or advisor, so please use this information only as a guide, and professional advice should be sought before considering your individual circumstances. So just want to make that very clear. Yeah. So let's get this started then with the webinar. So first of all, let's start with the fun facts about Australia and New Zealand. Firstly, let's talk about key facts about Australia. So as many of you know, Australia is one of the largest island country in the world, and it has 6 states and 2 land territories, and the Australian capital is Canberra. We have Jamaat Khanas in most of the main cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. In terms of the land size, just to keep the things in perspective for you, Australia is nearly 9 times larger in terms of the land size compared to Pakistan. So it's quite a huge country. In terms of the population, though, Australia is only 26 million population wise, compared to Pakistan, which I believe is 216 million. So that's a huge difference. And as you can imagine, Australia is not that densely populated at all. So that's something I thought will be interesting to you. Um, Australia is also known for its very vast land, beautiful beaches, natural beauty, wildlife, and some of the wildlife, like kangaroos, are only found in Australia. So that makes it very unique. Australia is also known for its sporting culture. So sports like cricket, footy, rugby, tennis, swimming, soccer, golf, basketball, etc., are very, very popular. The good thing about the sporting culture is that the sporting is in like people's, like day-to-day life. It's at very grassroots level, which is really good for the kids who are being brought up. And also doesn't matter if everybody doesn't get a chance to play in the international level, but at least the sport, which is very important for one's life, it's very encouraged in the schools, and in the day-to-day life. Yeah. And for all the cricket fans out there, uh, yeah, as you know, Australia is very much crazy about the cricket. So you will definitely enjoy the Australian sporting culture in general. Yeah. Um, Australia is a very multicultural country, as you would imagine, where migrants from all over the world has migrated. You will also find a good variety of food, um, cultural festivals, religions, languages. It's different types of languages, and the religions that you can find as well. Obviously, the most common language is English. In terms of the currency, Australia has Australian dollars, and time zone wise, Australia is 5 to 6 hours ahead of Pakistan, depending on the daylight savings. Yeah. In terms of the industries and business, the key industry and business which keeps the economy going are energy and resources sector, which is mining, um, agriculture, tourism, international students, and the education providing is one of the big industry as well, and the financial markets. Just few key industries for your knowledge. Yeah. So yeah, that's all about Australia. Now let's talk about New Zealand. So have you seen a movie Lord of the Rings or Hobbit? Um, these movies are actually shot in New Zealand. So New Zealand is very well known for its beautiful and scenic views. Um, and as you can see, a couple of photos on the right, it's beautiful country, and we call New Zealand as the second Switzerland because it's so pretty, and it's a very very fresh, and very less pollution and all that. So it's very very good place to be. Um, if we deep dive into New Zealand, New Zealand is made up of three main islands: South Island, North Island, and Stewart Island, which is on the small island on the bottom. The main cities in New Zealand are Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Hamilton. Wellington is the capital of New Zealand, and Auckland is the biggest city in terms of the population. Um, and we actually have a Jamaat Khana in Auckland as well, which is really good. And most of our Jamaati members live in Auckland. Yeah, so that's that. In terms of the population, New Zealand is nearly 5 million. Fun fact is that New Zealand has more sheep population than human population, which is quite interesting. I think Nazim shared this fact as well in the last presentation. So, yeah, and New Zealand actually exports quite a few sheep and the sheep products all over the world. Two main languages are English and Maori. Um, Currency is New Zealand dollars, and again, New Zealand has got a very good sporting culture as well. And the popular sports there are rugby union, rugby league, cricket, football, soccer, etc. On the top right picture, as you can see, New Zealand players seem to be performing a traditional dance called haka. They usually perform this before playing rugby union, and this dance is meant to entice the fear in the opponent team with whom they are supposed to be playing against. So um, there are some really good cultural facts about of New Zealand as well. New Zealand is also well known for a huge industry for agriculture, farming, and dairy. Yeah. So moving on, now let's talk about living. Like how is the living in ANZ? Especially if, let's say, if you're coming as a student or as a migrant family. I think these are some of the facts. I think it will help you to understand what you're planning to walk into, right? So let's talk about that. So first of all, overall, life in Australia and New Zealand is quite exceptionally good. It's rated really well. Australia and New Zealand cities are regularly, nominated for the top 10 livable cities in the world. So that shows that the living standard is pretty high, and it's got a good facilities to go along with it. In terms of the accommodation, if you talk about it, so there are various options to live in Australia and New Zealand. So you can actually rent a house or share a house, can live in a hostel, campus accommodation, rooming service. But most of the students live in a shared accommodation to reduce the cost, and that works really well. And as you know, we have got quite a few students here already, which you might know. So it's easy to uh, share accommodation that way and save a bit of money. Um, Ways to find house. It's fairly standard process. So you can find it via online websites like realestate.com.au or domain.com.au or trademe.co.nz. You can also look for the house uh, via newspapers or real estate agencies, university notice board, Facebook. So there are various ways you can look for the accommodation. We also have iCare team as mentioned earlier. So iCare team in a social welfare portfolio we have who can also help you out in terms of accommodation. But first tip I would like to give you, and I hope you're noting this down. I strongly suggest that you sort out your accommodation before landing in the country. This is to avoid issues for yourself or anybody else, right? Because it's very important that you have your accommodation sorted, just so that at least you know where you're going to be living. Yeah. In terms of the public transport, there are a number of ways of public transport in Australia and New Zealand, like buses, trains, trams, ferries. This differs from city to city. Bigger cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland have a really good public transport and a frequency compared to the regional areas. In the bigger cities, you can buy a public transport cards like Opal card in Sydney, Myki card in Melbourne, Ad Hop card in New Zealand, where you can top up the money as required and you can tap the card going on and off the public transport. So it's a fairly good public transport system. In terms of other options, obviously there are taxis and Ubers and all that as well. And it's very simple to use this service. You can just use it through a mobile app or a phone call. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward as well. Public transport. You may decide to buy your own car, and it's very easy to drive in Australia. Same as Pakistan. It's a left-hand drive as well. So I've seen international students and migrants picking it up fairly easily. Um, Private vehicles can be purchased via car dealer, online, newspaper, retail outlets. Obviously, you will need a valid license for it. Um, Sometimes visitors and temporary residents are allowed to work for a certain period of time when you migrate into the country. But please check your eligibility as the conditions and the rules change from state to state, territory to territory, and country to country. Um, getting Australia and New Zealand driving license is a very lengthy process. Yeah, so it involves learning the rule book, giving the theory test, then you get learner's license, then you get restricted license, and then you will become eligible for full license. So here is another tip for you guys, if you want to write it down. If you have overseas full license, not a conditional one, the full license, it becomes really easy to get full license in Australia or New Zealand. And when I say easy, it's not that straightforward, but still it will reduce number of steps for getting the full license in Australia and New Zealand. So I strongly suggest, if you are going to be coming to Australia or New Zealand, see if you can sort out your full license from back home. It really makes a bit of difference in terms of the steps that I mentioned on getting the license. Okay, I also strongly recommend you to learn driving from back home if possible. And the reason being, the driving license classes here are very expensive as well. And it's better to, if you can drive from, like, learn driving from back home, and it will be easier for you. In terms of the car insurance, there are two types of car insurances. Third party insurance and also the comprehensive insurance. So third party covers the, if you get involved into the accident, or it covers the other party's expenses, and with the comprehensive, it covers your other party expenses plus your car's damage expenses as well. It's highly recommended to have comprehensive insurance just to avoid any issues. Yeah. Now another tip I would like to share with you. One of the benefit of having a private vehicle is that it will increase your job options. So let's say, for example, if you're owning your own car, you can actually travel at the odd times without relying on a public transport, and it will also allow you to do even, let's say, driving a Uber, or and things like that. So that's something you may want to consider. So I strongly suggest, if possible, get the driving license part sorted before coming into this region. I'm gonna skip over some of the items fairly quickly. So public, like the groceries, there are lots of options for groceries. You don't need to worry about that. Like, we got Coles, Woolworths, New World, Park and Save. A lot of good grocery stores here. You can also get groceries from the petrol station. In terms of the Indian and Pakistani shops, there are heaps of them in the bigger cities, and most of the regional areas also have enough Indian and Pakistani shops now, where you can find a lot of things that you are used to eating back home. So don't need to worry about that. Halal food as well is becoming more and more popular, and you can actually find that in certain areas as well. So getting the halal meat and so stuff like that as well. In terms of the childcare facilities, there are really good childcare facilities available with educated staff. It's a licensed profession, so not anybody can open a childcare. So that means that your kids are very well looked after in when you leave them in the childcare. It's a blessing for the the couple or the family who are working full time or even part time, so at least you don't have to have that stress in your mind when your kids are in the childcare. And there are various types of childcare, like private childcare, council run childcare, family care, and cost differs from state to state and facility to facility. Yeah, so if let's say any families are planning to come over, and if they have kids, then that's at least a good option for keeping child in a really good facility. Yeah. In terms of the other things, there we got banks, we got post office, library, food and entertainment. You call, like, it's a world class. So some of the cities are really world class as well, so you can find pretty much whatever you want from all over the world. And also entertainment wise, restaurants, long drives, various places to visit, beaches, um, nightlife, etc. is very good as well. So uh, yeah, that's that. So overall, as you can see, living in ANZ region is pretty good with all the facilities you would expect from a well-established, developed country. So I hope that was helpful to know. In terms of the health and well-being, so both public and private healthcare is quite excellent in Australia and New Zealand. Um, Public care is funded through general taxation, and residents pay their share through taxation system, and also medical contribution is done through that. Alternatively, one can also have a private health insurance, which is a bit costly, but it actually provides you in a speedy treatment, especially for non-emergency treatments. Yeah. So one, let's talk about OSH cover, because that's going to be quite important for any international students planning to come to Australia and New Zealand. So so by law, international students are required to have appropriate and up-to-date medical insurance coverage as a condition of their visa study. So OSH, or it's called Overseas Student Health Cover, is a type of a health insurance designed specifically for international students. OSH will help you to provide for all kind of medical treatments, for a regular doctor consultation or emergency services should you require during your stay. um, how can you obtain OSH? It's that various options. You can either actually talk to the university if they have got any collaboration with any health insurance provider, or you can even buy it from the health insurance providers such as Bupa or Medibank or NIB. uh, yeah, so the various options out there. So another tip for you, if you want to talk regarding the healthcare. So as I mentioned, some universities have agreements with the insurance providers. So I would strongly suggest you to check with your university first, because you might be saving quite a bit of money there. But again, it's not mandatory for you to go with the university. So if you think that you're finding a better deal somewhere else, there is no restriction as such. But I've usually found universities try to do the right thing and get the um, good cover for the students that way. Yeah? Usually, OSH can cost $400 to $600 per year for singles, but again, the cost can vary depending on where you're going and with whom you're going. And just one thing to be aware of: OSH doesn't cover for any extras covers such as dental care or optical or a physio or a chiro, osteo, acupuncture, remedial massage, hearing aid, laser eye surgery, or anything like that. So just be careful about that. And there are a couple of tips I really would like to share with you, which has saved hundreds of thousands of dollars for people in the past. Tip number one there is dental work is very, very expensive in Australia and New Zealand. So if you got any broken tooth, go and get it fixed up. Get it fixed up before you come to the country, because it's really expensive. Obviously, accidents happen and you may need it. That's a separate thing. But if you have been keeping away, your dental checkups and the work for your dental treatment, I strongly suggest get that done. Because, for example, root canal treatment can easily cost here around $1,500 to $3,000. and that is also without a crown. So you can imagine it's very expensive. Another tip I would like to also give you is optical is very expensive here too, so make sure that you buy extra pair of glasses or lenses and make sure that you have a stock of it, because that can also cost you quite a bit of money comparatively. So I hope those tips help. Now moving on from OSH, let's talk about Medicare and private health cover facilities, which is available to residents and citizens. um, Medicare is a public care which is funded through general taxation, as I mentioned earlier, which means general doctors' visit are usually covered with the Medicare and in Australia, and also with the minimum charges in New Zealand. Government hospitals visit and various operations are also usually covered. And government hospitals, just one thing to make it very clear, government hospitals here are pretty good. They're not. I mean, if you because I mean, back home, we have that bad impression about government hospitals, but here they're really good, world class facilities. I have seen people doing operations in our government hospitals and walking out healthy as anything else. And yeah, and the surgeries like that could cost like $50,000, $100,000 in private hospitals, have been done for free, for example. So in government hospitals, so pretty good. Especially for the emergencies, they really look after very well. In terms of the private health insurance, it's also available, and there are also tax incentives from the government for the people who opts to choose the private health insurance. It gives you more options when you have a private health insurance for the private hospitals and the private doctors. So let's say if you want to be treated by a certain doctor, then private health insurance helps you, because in government hospital, it not usually you can't get that option. It's whoever is available, right? So that's an added benefit there. There are two types of private health covers. One is the hospital cover, and the another one is the extras cover. Similar to OSH, hospital cover will cover you for certain hospital treatments and the general practitioner things, but it won't cover you for the dental and optical and physio and all that. So some people choose to take extras cover as well, and it takes care of it. Even for the OSH, I forgot to mention, even for the OSH, you can actually choose to have OSH extras. So but there are various waiting periods and things like that. So don't want to bore you with too much detail there, but OSH extras is also available if you really want to have the extras cover for the international students. In terms of the general practitioners, I've spoken enough about them. They're pretty good, good facilities, pharmacies available everywhere, so no issues there. Private and public hospitals are also available in plentiful, so that's that as well. So I hope that gave you uh, some background on how the health system works in Australia and New Zealand. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, so yeah, so the reason um, I have included this side is, there might be instances where some of you might decide to study in the regional areas. So I just want to explain you what is the difference between urban living and regional living, because I know there's quite a bit of myth about it as well. So I mean, in nutshell, most of the living facilities between urban and regional is pretty good. The key difference is obviously population. So um, if you're living in an urban city, then that's quite a bit of hustle bustle. Like the lot of population, a lot of people in there. In the regional, there will be less. Size of the city will be obviously a bit of difference. Public transport facilities sometimes are not very good in regional areas, but regional area is a small town. You can easily have a private car and commute from one end to the other in 10 minutes sometimes, so or even like not 10 minutes, but maybe half an hour, so it's not that bad. Jamaat Khana access another one as well. So some of the regional areas don't have Jamaat Khanas, so that's something you may want to consider. Job opportunities might differ as well, and overall cost of living might differ as well. Yeah, so usually regional areas are tend to be um, cheaper uh, compared to the urban area. So for example, I just want those two photos, as you can see on the right hand side, the top photo is of Melbourne and the bottom photo is of the regional area called Geelong in Victoria. Yeah, so as you can see, Geelong's pretty good town as well, right? Like it's a regional town, but it's a pretty good beachside town, and it's pretty um, yeah, pretty livable. Other regional areas for migration purpose can be Perth, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Lake Macquarie, Newcastle, Wollongong, Adelaide, Hobart, Canberra, and there are some really good universities out there as well. So and again, there are lots more regional towns. I've just given you some names there. So depending on your course and migration eligibility criteria, you might be eligible for getting some bonus points for living and studying in regional areas. So that's quite beneficial if your goal is to migrate here, get a PR, and get a settle down here. So something that you may want to have a chat with your migration agent, or do a research for yourself to understand um, what are the options and what are the potential benefits for you there. So yeah, I hope this helps to understand the key differences between urban and regional living. Yeah, moving on. So cost of living. So this is quite important, I guess, for many of us, right? Because when you moving to the new country, you want to know how much it's going to cost you, so that you can budget for it. You can actually have that money, um, available just in case. So that's why I put this slide here. But again, I just want to make it very clear: this is a very generic information, and cost of living can depend on your lifestyle and cost can go up and down depending on whether you're living by yourself or sharing with other members, and how you're living, right? So I just want to make that very clear. So usually, if there's a student or a guardian's living, the 12 months expense, I would probably suggest keep it $21,000 or so. Just and this is excluding any education fees or childcare fees. Um, it may cost less. It can cost quite a less if you're sharing and saving a lot of money. So, but this is just as a guide, as I mentioned. Yeah. But let's say if you're coming here with a partner who's going to be living with you, then you can add 7,000 roughly on top of it. And if the child is coming with you, then you can put extra $3,000 on top of it. So I'll let you do your maths in this area. The reason being, it all depends on how you live, right? So that's for your purpose. I've given here some accommodation related cost as well, and also other living expenses. So accommodation, if you talk about it, if you're living in a hostel, rental, share like a shared rental or a campus homestay, house rental, the cost can differ, as you can see. And also on top of it, you got a groceries cost, gas and electricity cost, phone and internet cost, public transport, car expenses, entertainment, and so forth. So and this information is available in the settlement guide as well, so you can deep dive into it when you get a hands on to the settlement guide. Yeah. So moving on, similarly for New Zealand, uh, there are some costs here again as a ballpark. It's a generic information, and it all depends on your lifestyle. So depending on so this is for the single student, the first table on the top left. So if that's a single student living, then there is accommodation cost, internet, water, such a utilities cost, and then there's a food, transport, phone, and there's a total. So for New Zealand, we were able to find a really good link where you can actually um, find out more about the living expenses, and it differs from city to city, state to state. So it's very hard to give you it's very hard to give you like a stock standard numbers here. But this is just more for your guide. Yeah. And if you're living as a family, then there's a cost expectation here as well. Yeah. So that's about the cost of living. Money management, it's very, very important, as you know, and the finance management as well. It's important to prepare your budget and stick to it, on a weekly, monthly basis. I remember when I came to Australia a long time ago, I used to have a budget in my mind saying I can only afford to spend this much money, and then I stick with it, and that really helped me personally speaking as well. So it's very important to have that. And also, it is very important to have enough funds to support your university and school fees and the living expenses. There might be times, when you won't have a job. There might be few weeks, few months when you may not be able to work, and maybe due to your study commitments. Your exams are coming, for example, or if there is a situation like pandemic, there like a COVID, and in a lockdown, sometimes you may not be able to work. Um, so please make sure that you have enough funds. It is very important to have the savings as well for the rainy days. So yeah, so just something to be aware of. Obviously, there are banks and financial institutions. And there's a Western Union as well, for example, or for money transfer overseas. So that's no issue there. Just for your knowledge, tax file number for Australia and Inland Revenue Department number is required for working purpose. And also annually you do a tax return similar to, I believe, what you do in Pakistan. Um, and building a credit is very important. Um, it's good to make sure that you should definitely make sure that you are never overdue your bills. It's because that can impact your credits. If so, ensure that you up to date with your bill payments and don't have any outstanding debts, because more you look after your credit, it helps you down the track when you want to borrow some money, or when you want to engage with the financial institutions. um, yeah, and the biggest tip I would give on this slide is, just make sure that you have enough funds available to support your studies and also the living as well. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so finding a job. So this is one of the things that I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about, right? So how am I going to pay for all these expenses and survive? Yeah, because yeah, and see, it's quite normal in Australian culture to do a blue collar jobs. Like for example, even Australian kids when they're growing up, they do work in McDonald's. Yeah, so it's quite normal. So don't feel like doing a blue collar job is going to make you look poor or disadvantaged or anything. It's very, very, very normal for international students to do a blue collar jobs while studying, right? So just one thing I want to make it very clear. And the work ethics and working standards here is really good. Like they look after you quite well, and make sure that you're not being treated as any slave or anything. It's actually very normal to do a blue collar job here, right? So just want to make it very clear. Just so that as of 1st July 2021, national minimum wage for Australia is $20.33 per hour. Yeah. So let's say if you're doing any blue collar job or any jobs, then this is the minimum dollars that you can expect to earn. Obviously there are other, some employers try to sneak out of it, which is not right. Yeah, so just for your knowledge. And similarly for New Zealand, it's as of 1st April 2021, it's $20 per hour. Yeah, so that's 20 New Zealand dollars per hour, and the previous one is 20.33 Australian dollars per hour. Yeah, so this is just for your knowledge, so that um, how much you can expect to kind of earn. Okay, so to work in ANZ region, so firstly you need a work permit, and as a student, you are allowed to work for certain periods. So I'll cover that in the next slide. So you can easily get the work permit. Okay, just need to apply for it and wait for the confirmation. In Australia, you need to apply for tax file number, and in New Zealand, you need to apply for Inland Revenue Department number. And then you need to provide this to your employer so that when they pay you, they pay you after removing the tax that you have to pay for it. But usually, most of the students who are the low income earners get most of that tax back when they apply for the tax return. Yeah. And there are different types of jobs available. So it can be a part-time job, casual job, shift work, full-time job. So yeah, so depending on your skills, you can get that. Yeah. How to find a job? There are different ways to do that. So you can look at the online websites like seek.com.au or seek.co.nz, or jobser.gov.au, LinkedIn. There are a lot of jobs there as well. Careers.govt.nz. So all this websites and information is there on the in the guide. So you don't need to worry about noting them down while I'm speaking. All this information, we like links is are available on the settlement guide. So if you need the copy of it, just email us and we can provide you that. Yeah. So yeah, jobs can be found in newsletters, recruitment agencies. So just Google it up. Walk-ins sometimes can work as well. And the word of mouth is the best way to find a job. Like somebody knows somebody, and you get to know about it. So always keep a contact like that. Other options, university job boards, Facebook groups are also another way of doing it. I think I mentioned to you earlier that um, having an option of riding a Uber, for example, can be one of the options as well. And also, I want to also emphasize on one thing, that don't just assume that you're only gonna get the blue collar jobs. You can also get a professional job as well. You might have some experience back home, or you might have some skills that you can offer. So, for example, IT or accounting is the classic example. Like nursing is another good example. You can find some really good jobs in your own profession while you're studying as well. The only thing is you can only work for 20 hours during the semester time. Yeah, so you just, as long as you can have those restrictions met, and as long as your employer is happy to employ you for 20 hours a week, which is quite normal to have a part-time job, then you can get those jobs as well. And again, all those websites and things that I mentioned, you can actually find for those jobs there. Yeah. Another good tip I would like to give you, that you can even go to the freelancing work, and be your own boss, in a way that let's say, for example, IT guys, for example, can, if they have a good developer skill, they can actually go to the websites like freelancer.com.au and find projects for them to deliver. And that can, you can actually build your profile while actually you are studying. So that can be another way of doing it. There's another site called Airtasker, where you can also find some freelancing work as well. Yeah. And obviously we have institutional support. So eye care team and social welfare can also help you and support you with any tips and tricks when you to find a jobs. So when you come here, we can help you there in that space. To assist you with the process, AKEB also has got AKEB for ANZ, I mean, also has got a career horizon and can offer you a job ready service, which means that like they can do a one-on-one session with you, aiming to help you in refining your resume or CV, having your LinkedIn profile updated, prepare you for interview, how to present, what to wear, what to talk, what not to talk, and leverage your network to find a suitable role. So we have those institutional supports available as well. Yeah, so you can always tap on that benefit when you land here. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and when you here, and we can even when you're there as well, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we can help in that space. Yeah. Okay, so I've got two more slides to go, and then I think I'll hand it over to Sharmin. So working rights while studying. So again, please note that this information is for guide only. You should always check your visa conditions and check with your check on the official migration websites as well. um, So usually primary applicant who is a student is allowed to work 20 hours a week during the semester time, and outside the semester time you are allowed to work full time. So that's a general rule of thumb. But obviously, as I said, depending on your course, depending on your degree, this might vary. So check your visa conditions accordingly. And the secondary applicant, so let's say if you're coming with a family, then usually spouse and children are allowed to work full time, or there's no restriction usually for them. But again, in some of the visas there might be some restrictions. So um, yeah, so I would strongly suggest you check your visa conditions and also official migration websites for it. This is really interesting and very helpful topic. If you can, um, so in terms of the skills, like how to identify what skills are required for migration in ANZ. So there are really good websites available, official websites available, um, which you can tap into. So Australia, New Zealand is very good in analyzing what skills they require in the country now, or at a specific time point in time, or even in long term. You know? So this can be found on the website by simply going. Like you can simply Google search saying skills in demand in Australia for migration or skills in demand in New Zealand for migration, and you'll find those websites. And I'll list it down this couple of websites here as well, right? So yeah, if your skills in demand, it can really benefit you to apply for the residency. But I really want to make one thing very clear, that this list keeps changing frequently, and depending on the skills required for the country, right? So it keeps changing quite a bit. So the skills which you may find today in demand may not be in demand tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's a fact. Yeah. So that's a bit of risk that sometime you have to take. But if you have a long-term vision, then you can predict some of the assume some of the things, right? So you can select those courses for yourself that way. So it's important that you think strategic and long term when selecting your courses for study. Yeah, so here are a couple of websites before deciding the program or the qualification of study. It's very important to check whether your chosen qualification falls under the skilled occupation list for Australia and skill shortage list checker for New Zealand. So I hope this helps. So that's that. And yeah, so these are the two settlement guides as I was talking about. I just want to give you, it's in a PDF format. Um, yeah, we will be providing the slides to you if you need it, or we can also provide the settlement guides to you. So just reach out to us on the email address at the bottom, careerhorizon@anzni.org, and more than happy to share this with you. This will really help you. Yeah, so that would be my last tip of before I hand over to Shermin, saying please read these settlement guides, and I think it will really give you more information. Yeah. So I would now like to welcome one of the international students we have in Melbourne. So now I'll hand it over to Shermin, who's currently living in Melbourne, Australia, and she's originally from Pakistan. And Shermin studies psychological science at Deakin University. So Shermin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yalimdad, everyone, and happy Independence Day to you all. So, my experience was not too good because I came and, I hit the lockdown. So, that was one of the things. But, however, to find jobs in Australia, it's kind of, you can find jobs near, like, cafes or McDonald's or KFC, and it's, I think, pretty much normal for all of the students who come over here and do these kinds of jobs. So, and these jobs are really necessary for you to develop your skills in your professional life settings, because in your CV, if you will write that you have worked somewhere in McDonald's or somewhere else, so you might have learned skills like teamwork and things like that. So it really helps you to boost your CV as well. So yeah, and secondly, right now, looking at the conditions, I'm not working because I lost my job due to lockdown. So yeah, that is one of the things. And I feel like, you know due to lockdown, because I have came, and after a few days I just came into a lockdown, so I haven't found much of the exposure to work. However, I live in a university accommodation, and which is that I feel like the in university I'm living here, it's pretty much good, the accommodation, and the prices of your utilities are all included in the rent. So I feel like this is a good package for me. However, this is much expensive because I live in a studio apartment, so it's like all by myself. So it's kind of expensive, but if you have a lot to do and you don't want to share a apartment with anyone or your room, so this is one of the options I feel like. And it's really a good thing to live in a community or in a residential services of university, because you have exposure to meet new people, and you have developed so many things. They have multiple programs for you. So currently I'm also doing internship in freelancing within my university, so it's kind of a good exposure as well to just get a skill set of things, and you will know how the market of a job market runs and what are the recruitment processes and everything like that. So for now, everything is slow due to COVID, but once the restrictions will ease out, I feel like there are multiple opportunities for you to work. There is a multiple opportunity or growing business, I could say, in hospitality as well. So you can, always look jobs there as well. So yeah, I feel like due to COVID, everything is messed up. But yeah, surely when there's no COVID or anything, you will get a good, hands-on jobs available in Australia. So yeah, that's I feel like I have this much to say, because however, there are multiple opportunities online that you can, if you are good in something, you can teach some students as well. You can work in, if you have a qualification or you have some skill sets, so you can work in schools as well. So there are multiple opportunities for you to work and you to learn new things. So I just want to say one thing, that don't come here thinking like you will get a good job, because ultimately this is not the thing. If you have a good like CV or resume that you can throw or you can show in the market, so yeah, you will find a good job. But don't come and think like you will find a good job, like white collar job, because initially you will find jobs in the, like I said before, like in cafe or things like that. So just be mentally prepared that you can find any job. Don't try to do any job, or you feel like this is kind of a not really your kind of job, but trust me, you have to do it. So you have to do it. So there is no yes or no to jobs. So yeah, just mentally be prepared that you will get jobs like working in a station or petrol pump station or anywhere. So just to be sure that you have to go through this. So yeah, I'm done with this, so I'll hand over to Anish bhai. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amin, for sharing your experience. I totally agree with Shamin that at this stage, because of COVID, and it's not only in Australia, everywhere else as well, it's bit different experience. And yeah, you should be prepared of doing a blue collar job to start with, and it's not that you can't find a white collar job or professional job. It's just that you need to expect for the worst, like and you can still get those white collar jobs as well. So sure. So if I can have my screen shared for a second. Thank you. So before we open up for Q&A, I just want to also mention about third webinar, Career Horizon panel discussion, which is coming up on 28th August as well at 2 p.m. So the same time. So yeah, before we open up for the quick Q&A, if you really would like to get the slides that we just shared today and also the settlement guides, please contact us on careerhorizons@anzni.org, and we will be more than happy to share that with you. And if you got any other questions as well, even after the Q&A session, happy to answer that as well. So you can reach out to us on that on that email address. Yeah. All right, so let's open up for Q&A.
So thank you so much, Anish. Thank you so much for this, for the information that you have shared. I believe it was very comprehensive. For everyone, the email addresses for the Ahun EB, ANZ and Ahun EB Pakistan, um, has been shared over will be shared in the comment in the chat box, so you could of course look it up. And we have a few questions that I'm gonna address here, and Anish, it would be great if you can answer those questions. But before that, I would just remind everyone who's watching us today right now that we are sharing a feedback form with you. Kindly fill that out, because it's going to really help us in our future webinars. Your feedback, of course, is very important to us. So over to question and answers. The first question that we have received is about investment for PR in Australia. So perhaps you could divide that question, and then you can briefly talk about it. And the first section could be about, of course, the process of PR, and the second one would be about the investment that one should keep in mind while applying for a PR in Australia.
Yeah, so I'm aware that there are some visas available out there for the investment purpose. I'll be honest with you, I'm not very certain about the details on that part, because I was we mainly focusing at this stage for the students' point of view. I'm happy to come back to you on that question, so feel free to email back to me. But you're right, like there are investment visas available out there, and happy to provide you some more information on that one offline. In terms of the process of the PR, I believe Nazim will be the best person to talk about it. So can I please invite Nazim to, and I believe we did touch on this in the webinar one. So I strongly suggest you can also go through webinar one on the YouTube channel to get into the more detail. But Nazim, if you can provide a high level on that one, that would be really great.
Sorry, do you mind repeating that second part of the question, Chanil, that was asked?
So the first part is the process of the PR, and then second is about the investment. Then one should keep in mind while applying for PR in Australia.
So for PR, I mean, I would from a PR permanent residency perspective, that was more so much around the skilled migration list. I would suggest that, you know, if people are looking to sort of go down that path, to look at the occupation lists that are on offer, I think, or reach out to us and see if we can sort of help out with a specific query that you have in mind, depending on your current status as to what line of work you're in, or what you're sort of intending to come to Australia for. But yeah, I think it would sort of vary on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, I guess once you have your course finished, at that time, depending on how much your course or your skills are in demand, you'll be eligible for some points, depending on your age, depending on your marital status, depending on your spouse's education. You'll be eligible for some extra points, and once you know whether you meet that points or not, you may or may not become eligible for the PR or TR. Sometimes if you're living in the regional areas, you'll be eligible for some extra points for that, and also for the IELTS, or the English language courses, you can get that as well. So usually what we have seen is that um, usually what we've seen is that once you know how many points you are accumulating from your own personal situation, that's when your migration agent can guide you whether you're eligible to apply for PPR directly, or you have to go to the temporary residence. And during that temporary residence period, if you can look for the job in your own profession and accumulate that experience, then you'll become eligible for the PR. So in a nutshell, that's the high level process, but happy for you to contact us offline, and we can see what we can do to help you out there.
All right, perfect. And of course, in order to contact our ANZ, Anish and Nazim, the email address is right below on the screen right now. So you could, of course, note it down and you can connect with them anytime you want. The second question, I believe, is already been answered in the presentation. However, I'm still going to pose it here so that if you feel that you want to add anything, you could, of course, add. The question is, if a partner can apply for work permit while you study or while the other person is studying.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, as I mentioned in my presentation, it depends on the visa condition. So, if your partner is allowed to work as per her visa conditions, then yes, definitely she can apply for the work permit, and she can go about looking for a job. Yeah, so it all depends on your visa condition.
Right. And also, if you can let our audience know how exactly people can find out these specifications about their visas, um, let's say the work permit and everything else.
Do you mean how do they know whether they're eligible to work or not? Is that what you mean, or how to go about getting the work permits and things like that? Sorry, just to clarify.
So, so my question is that how people can know what features are included in their particular kind of visa. So, is there a particular resource or a website that
Oh, okay.
they should be visiting in order to get more information about
Yeah.
the visas?
Okay. So when you are granted a visa by the immigration department, you get a letter from the immigration department saying what are the conditions on your visa. So whether some of the conditions can be you may not have or may have multiple entries to the country. You have restricted work permission. You might have unlimited work permission. You may or may not have, a condition to be able to study in a country, uh, work in the country, extend the visa or not. So the various conditions. It's very clearly mentioned in your visa letter, and that will clearly explain you what you can and can't do um, as a part of the visa that has been granted to you. And you can contact the immigration department, and each visa conditions have got the code or the number assigned to it, so you can actually easily talk to immigration like department, or even the website. You don't even need to talk to somebody, just go to the website and say, see, what does this actual condition mean? Does it mean that I can work, or my partner can work, or not? So it's pretty clear. So once you get the visa, it's pretty clear on that visa document what you can and can't do.
All right, perfect. Makes sense. So the next question, again, this question has two parts. I'm going to read this question out because it's a bit long. So the question is what are the skills high in demand in Australia and New Zealand? And what are the better ways to apply for PR when we are in the education field? The second part of the question says that who should we contact to in our institutions for further guidance if we don't want to go for agents. So I believe the second part again is very important, but feel free to answer in whatever order you feel like.
Yeah, sure. So, if you don't mind, can you keep that question up? I think it will be three parts to that question. So, the first one, so skills in demand and better ways to apply for the PR when you're in education field. Okay, so the first part, skills in demand, the list which are shared, the links and the web pages that are shared with you, it's very easy to find out which skills are in demand at this point in time. Yeah, as I mentioned, and I want to quote that note, kind of again, is that that skill are in demand as of today. So let's say when you finish your course in a year or 2 or 3, this list might change. So just something that you need to be mindful of, right? And nobody has got a crystal ball to say go for this or go for that, right? So I just want to make it very clear about that one, because I know there has been members who came to the country and they might have that expectation, or somebody might have told them that, oh, this is IT is good, or accounting is good, or nursing is good, or education is good, go for it. And then 3 years later the things have changed. So just want to make it very clear. So if you so the skills in demand, you can follow that website. um, Apply for the PR when you're in the education field. Now, this is very specific question. As I mentioned, I'm not the migration agent, so I unfortunately cannot answer that question with the skills that I have. But feel free to send us an email, and I'm happy to follow it up for you and find out a bit more about it. Because I know education field depends on various things, like which level of education, and whether it is a professor level or a school level or a university level. So I just need to understand that a bit more, and see if we can help you with that. Yeah. Whom should we contact to in any institution guide? Okay. So again, as I mentioned to you earlier, I mean, we don't have a migration agents working in the institution as such. The best I would suggest that you can do is that you can do your own research on the official websites to find out. And also sometimes migration agents tell you something, just don't just accept, or assume that they are. I mean, if you're not sure about it, jump to the official website and find out. Again, if you need any further help, you can email it to us. But um, as I said, we may not be able to provide you a personalized solution for your query, because we are not the migration agents. It's a licensed profession in Australia and New Zealand, and we are not allowed to give a personalized solution for your migration queries as such. Yeah.
Right. So the next question is about the breakdown of the expenses in Australia and New Zealand. I believe this is something that we have already discussed in the
That's right.
presentation,
Yeah.
and of course, it varies as well from person to person as to how and what amount of money you are spending in particular aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Um,
And I strongly suggest email. If you email us, we can send you the settlement guides, which actually goes deep dive into it. And all those things that are shared here is quite a brief, but we have got the details about around it as well. But as Shannon, you mentioned, that cost can vary from person to person. Yes.
Right. So moving to the next question, what do you think could be the average accommodation cost in Australia and New Zealand?
Again, I think that slide that we have shared contains that information around it. So depending on the types of accommodation as well, like if you are if you're living in a shared accommodation, there's a certain amount. If you're having your own studio apartment, like Sharmin, for example, there can be a separate amount. So it differs from there. Yeah.
Right. So again, to everyone who's here with us, all this information about the cost is in the presentation. You could, of course, at any time contact AKEP, ANZ. They can, of course, share the slides with you, and you can have a very detailed guide of all the expenses and the breakdown of the expenses as well. Just to remind you of one more thing, the link to the feedback form has been shared in the chat box. So please fill that out. It's going to be really helpful for us as well. We are going to All right, so we are going to move to our last question of this webinar. And this is asked from a parent, actually. The parent is asking if you can give her a very lump sum average monthly expenditure, um, just to, give an idea, because if she wants to send her kid to Australia. So what could be a lump sum amount that they should keep in mind?
You mean from the living expense point of view?
Yes, so the monthly expenditure, basically.
Um, and again, this is officially available. I mean, I can give you some guidance there. And again, this is something we shared in our slides anyway. Let me just quickly check my notes. I don't want to, give you the wrong information. So it's about $21,041 for a student or a guardian for 12 months. So divide that by 12, you'll get the monthly expense there. And in terms of the New Zealand as well, I think it's about $15,000 to $20,000 if you're living in South Island, and $18,000 to $25,000 for a North Island. This is for the international students' cost of living per year.
Right. All right, then. This is the end of the question answer session then. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, again, for the webinar, for sharing all the information, for doing all this, for doing the webinar for us as well. And thank you everyone who joined us today, who was very interested in the webinar. Thank you for asking such brilliant questions as well. Again, if you want to ask any further question, if you want any personal guidance, feel free to contact ANZ AKB or Pakistan AKB. We are definitely always here to help you all out. There will be a third webinar again. The third webinar is going to be conducted on the 28th of August. And again, more information will be shared with you. Nazim, perhaps you could brief everyone about what this third webinar will be, and then perhaps you could wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chanel. So the third webinar is all about getting professionals who have migrated from Pakistan to Australia or New Zealand. Either they've come here as an international student or they've migrated as settled families, and they've sort of established themselves. And just to walk you through their journey, we've picked 4 particular fields, and the reason for those fields is because they're the most common fields that our Jamaat is in, and that's nursing, IT, accounting and finance, and engineering. So yeah, those are the 4 fields. So if you're interested in sort of learning more about that, or if you're interested in just learning about what it's like to sort of adjust to life here and sort of slowly establish yourselves, and sort of the detailed experience that some of these Jamaati members have had while sort of coming here as an international student and then establishing themselves here, please do join us. And then, I'm sure they will also be looking forward to answering any questions that you may have.
All right. So thank you so much, Nazim, for sharing the information. I believe it's going to be very interesting webinar, of course, because, of course, everyone is going to get a lot of information about the major career fields that are, again, very much prevalent in Australia and New Zealand. So thank you so much for the webinar. Anish, do you want to say something at the end of the webinar, please?
I just really want to thank everyone for dialing in, and thank you to AKB Pakistan for giving us this opportunity. And if you decide to come to Australia and New Zealand, then we'll see you then. So good luck, and God bless.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day. We're really looking forward to see you in the next webinar. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.